Welcome back, guys, to Let's Build Jurassic World. As you can see in this episode, we are back and going to complete the Indominus Rex enclosure. Here we've added in all that kind of outside detail, but most importantly, we have added in a Minecraft Indominus Rex herself. So guys, on that note, we might as well begin. Now, as we open here, you'll notice a few things have changed, the most obvious of which is the fact there are no trees, and I removed the trees just so as I was building the Indominus Rex, they weren't getting in the way and I wasn't crashing into them, and as well I've also put in this 36 block long redstone ruler, and I call it a ruler because I designed this Indominus Rex outside of the enclosure, and by putting that redstone line in, I could make sure that the 36 block long Indominus Rex would fit in. Now, something else you might notice, which is kind of external, is that the shaders pack has changed since that intro, and the reason for that is because I've actually recently built a brand new PC, and I started recording this episode, and because as I started recording it, some of my mods weren't exactly the same as they were on the previous computer, which means my shaders were a little bit different, and at this point of the build, I didn't have World Edit. But as the build progresses, I kind of updated all my software, that kind of stuff on the PC, because I didn't do it all in one sitting, so by the end of this build, we kind of completely come full circle back to normal with, our normal shaders and World Edit back installed to kind of help along on my end of the build. So, as you can see here, the kind of style I'm going for with this episode is very similar to way back when we did the dinosaur skeletons on the inside of the Jurassic Park Visitor Center. And I say it's similar in that respect. In the way I'm kind of recording it, I try not to skip as much because I feel just in this body itself there is plenty enough detail to kind of concentrate on, and there's so much variety in it that I feel that there can be a lot of focus placed on it. Because back in a build like when we did this enclosure itself, I do one section of the wall and then just welded it in the rest of the wall, just so, for the viewers it means the episodes run a bit nicely and, more smoothly, and just for my sake it takes much less time. But with this Indominus Rex, World Edit wasn't involved at all, I built it block for block just to make sure every single detail was exactly how I wanted it, and I could create this kind of nice, varied dinosaur. So what's interesting about the Indominus Rex is obviously in Jurassic Park it's a hybrid, it's a brand new dinosaur, which means it's kind of a little bit different in lots of respects. So it's got long forearms, and you could see in the design of the head and neck there, it's it's a much bigger dinosaur, but at the same time it's got quite a long neck on it for a dinosaur. So obviously these kind of identifiers are something I really wanted to concentrate on, because obviously we're in Minecraft, so there are huge limitations when it comes to building something like a dinosaur, because we're still limited to these blocks, these block bricks we're building with. It's like you have to really consider the size of the animal and the amount of detail you want to go in it, because as we see here, maybe this Indominus Rex is probably a little bit bigger than it is in the film, but if I built it any smaller within Minecraft, I'd then be sacrificing detail, and as you sacrifice detail, obviously you lose the ability to identify as this kind of unique dinosaur. It might end up just looking like a generic carnivore, which isn't what I wanted. I wanted people to look at this and be able to say, yes, that's, the Indominus Rex. So that's why I'm using all these kind of varieties of greys and really trying to make it look really hostile is kind of the overarching kind of theme with this. I'm using these stone walls on the back, they're kind of like spikes just to show it's like rugged, kind of rigid skeleton underneath, and make it look really violent and aggressive. So that's really what I was going for, with this overall design. So now we're building in the body, and the body bits I skipped through just for your sake, that's in editing. And then what we're actually going to add in here are the arms. Now the arms were really tricky because it goes back to that kind of whole debate of detail and Minecraft and that sort of thing. And because we're using obviously these blocks, it's kind of difficult to make the arms look nice and realistic because they're so small compared to the rest of the body. So I really tried here to make them look long enough and tried to make them look, putting in these stairs upside down as as claws, and I think as we zoom out there, I think it actually looks quite nice, and using the light grey as a bit of variety against the body just allows it to kind of highlight and stand out as an arm, and I feel overall that's probably the best I could do with Minecraft. And then on top of those arms, I then had to build the legs, and I sat on top of in the way of like, it's the same kind of argument as in the legs. The problem with the legs is you can build maybe the side on view nicely, but if I built them, I'm going to build the legs just out of like a sheet of like stone really, like there's no depth to them. And the problem with that is because if I'd added depth, it would have made the legs look fat and chunky, and that's not what I wanted. This is like an apex predator. It's big, it's slender, and it's fast. So I put these nice kind of slim legs on it to make it look as if it could like sprint through the forest and hunt down its prey. So as you can see here, I'm just kind of developing the kind of whole idea slowly. Like I'll knock bricks away, I'll add new bricks in, just because like I want to make sure this leg looked kind of as natural as possible. So I'm really just trying to kind of perfect the overall design and make sure it kind of looks nice and smooth. But even in some areas where it doesn't, overall it doesn't quite matter, because these legs are so low down at this point. They'll be hidden away by all the jungle foliage that we're going to go back in and add in later. So as you can see, the way I've done the leg, it's really fat at the top and it kind of slims down as you get closer to the bottom, as you'd kind of expect. And then obviously we've got to add in a massive foot. So the feet are nice and wide, nice and big. Again, that idea that this thing can sprint across the landscape. So I make these 3 wide. And in the same way of using the light, the lighter greys to make the arms stand out, I did the same for the foot. Now here I built it and I just pushed it back there in that edit, just slid it under the leg a little bit closer, just to make it look like it's right underneath. And as we zoom out here, I think that looks really nice. I just come in and add in that little extra bit of detail there to kind of smoothen it off. Now what you'll notice is that it's kind of going back to that this Indominus Rex is a little bit bigger than that of what we see in the film. So that kind of made the problem of fitting it into this enclosure we've built. So the way I overcame this was to add in the nice long, realistically length tail. I had to obviously bend the tail around and make it look like the Indominus Rex was moving around the enclosure and its tail was moving with it. So as I'm putting these blocks in here, they come on like this nice curved way, and then it comes around to being parallel with the body again, as if the Indominus Rex is just turned around at this end of the enclosure. So now what I'm kind of waging on is the fact that this tail obviously has to thin. It gets thinner as it gets closer to the end. So here, I'm just using blocks here to kind of wager and make sure it kind of looks like a nice gradual return to the pointed end of the tail. So I'm building it up and slowly just making it shorter and shorter as we get closer to the edge. And obviously detail then has to be removed. So while I've got these nice kind of spiked spine across the back of the Indominus Rex, it can only go so far before it ends up looking too big and bulky. So we move it up to this point here, and then at this point I start really refining the design and starting getting rid of like little kind of marks. So we're still keeping the spine right up until this point, and then we kind of smoothen it off, and again just make it smaller, make it a little bit more compact, so it'll actually fit and make it look as if this is just getting gradually smaller. And this Indominus Rex for me was kind of a really fun build, because I've built all sorts of stuff in my time doing Let's Builds. I've built castles, I've built visitor centers, I've built great archways, but I've never actually built something that's supposed to look like a living creature on camera. Back in the T-Rex paddock episode, I quickly edited in a T-Rex at the end. Because it was so hidden in the tree line, I didn't put loads of detail in it. I obviously didn't focus the episode on that. But with this episode being focused on the Indominus Rex, it was quite an interesting challenge for me to go in and actually build, a full-scale dinosaur in Minecraft. Now, as you can see, this side of the Indominus Rex is identical to the other side. So if you are following along with this build, obviously just rewind again and rewatch the way I did it, because that whole side was identical, bar this leg. Both legs couldn't be identical on the ground for one reason, and that's because I wanted to try to create the illusion that this kind of statue dinosaur is actually walking through its enclosure. So the way I did that was I've got the left leg firmly on the ground, and then the right leg is going to be lifted up slightly as if it's just picked up its leg. So I'm kind of adapting the design of that foot just to make it look like gravity is pulling it down, so the toes are pointed downwards instead of forwards, and just that kind of extra little detail just to make it to make it look, even though we won't see this, hidden away in the tree line, if you were in this world and you walked up underneath this, you know, Indominus Rex, it's one of those extra little details you might not have expected, and I like that to be there, because this is kind of like my, you know, signature on these builds. You know, it's something, the reason I've not used modded dinosaurs in this build is because I want this whole thing to be my kind of design. So building in these little features like that is really just allows me to put my thumbprint, my signature on the overall build of Jurassic Park. Now, as we come back here, we re-add in the trees, and you'll notice we're back to normal. By this point, I'd found all the mods again, reinstalled them, and we were back on board with our original Minecraft Let's Build setup. So we're back with Sildur's shaders again, you know, World Edit has been reinstalled, and we can move on as before. Now, what we're actually doing here, someone called, I believe he's called Steven, in the comments of one of the previous Indominus Rex episodes, said he was following on with these builds, and in his build he'd use this kind of like cut away the half slabs here to make it look like the Indominus Rex had scratched this wall, and I thought that was a genius idea because this was something I really had no idea how I was going to approach. So Stephen, thank you for saying that, because that gave me a really like kind of nice way to add in that extra little detail and make it look like the films we saw. Now there, you just saw me do a tiny bit of terraforming off camera. We had a river going around the Indominus Rex paddock, so that had to be covered up with forest, and now the big forest has been added in. It was time to do a bit of world editing and give us that kind of nice open space around the Indominus Rex paddock that we see in the film. So, but then on this side of the paddock, from what I remember, I think only two sides are kind of exposed and the rest of them are nicely tucked away into the jungle. And this is a great example of why world edit is so important in my builds. You saw how quickly there I can put together a forest. That took me maybe a minute and a half to do that whole forest. And without world edit, that would have took absolutely ages. So now we're adding in the next set of detail, and that is the fact that the grass doesn't run up to the actual paddock. It's a bit gravelly, a bit dirty, you know, they've got cars coming and going, kind of trucks, construction equipment. So around the Indominus Rex, we're actually going to use gravel. So in the same way we did the path in the previous episode inside the Indominus Rex enclosure, we're going to do that exact same style, but instead we're using gravel and mixed with cobblestone. Because we've got so much gravel here, cobblestone is kind of a really good divider. It just kind of mixes up the textures a bit and gives that idea of kind of rough, kind of imperfect ground really. So here we are, just mixing in cobblestone and making it look kind of nice. And even though it's a detail, if you were walking over, you probably wouldn't notice. Just again, the fact that it's there, you kind of subconsciously like notice the extra detail. So now around the edge of this, just again add in a bit of shadow, a bit of detail, make the ground look a bit more rough. I just use these slabs here kind of sporadically around as if they are kind of rocks that have been tossed aside, and then surround them in the overgrown grass, because I think that just works kind of nicely, you know, and just kind of adds that kind of embedded detail again. I think as we see here with the completed area, it works really nicely. Now, the final addition we need to add are just kind of that idea that this Indominus Rex enclosure isn't finished is something I've kind of been arcing on for the whole kind of series. So that means we're going to add in a little bit of construction equipment, and this again was a bit difficult, and this was a cherry picker design I used back in the visitor center interior. So I actually built, so this idea is, you know, it's a cherry picker that could be raised up and raised down, and you know, construction work could be done on the wall. So that's kind of what we're building all around this area, sort of like kind of mechanical boxes, you know, crates, that kind of stuff. Things you'd expect to be around this super modern theme park. And over here in this corner is, again, it's another area of the wall that isn't finished. So over in this side of the enclosure, there are actually big concrete blocks, you know, just kind of lying around. And these are obviously the concrete blocks that are used to build up the wall itself. So again, in the same way we did the grass and stuff, I'm kind of sporadically leaving around this kind of construction equipment to make it look like this area is unfinished. Now, off camera, I went away and built a couple of extra things. So we put in some like more little blocks here, kind of sporadically to build up that idea. You know, we've got big epic gate from the previous episode, and here using little furnaces in here. It looks like we've just got this really kind of modern futuristic equipment around, you know, little metal crates, that sort of thing, another cherry picker. But obviously the main focus was the enclosure itself, and I am really happy with how this build has turned out. We've got the incredible Indominus Rex, we've got the surrounding forest, and then we've got this lovely control room on the inside. Now guys, thank you for watching these set of episodes, and the next episode I'm going to do is something that's been hugely requested and is going to be my very first how-to episode, in which I do one of these builds block for block. So guys, thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Goodbye.